Ever get that feeling? Like, deep down, you're being called to do something, but every fiber of your being is screaming, no way, this is wrong.
Yeah, that's a pretty intense dilemma.
It is, and that's the situation we're diving into today with the story of Jonah. This isn't just some Sunday school story, though, right?
Oh, absolutely not. The tale of Jonah, it's woven into the fabric of both Jewish and Christian traditions. It gives us a glimpse into that, let's say, complicated relationship between the Israelites and the other nations around them.
It's like peeking behind the curtain of history,
Yeah.
right? And in this case, the neighbor at the center of the drama is none other than, drum roll please,
Nineveh.
Nineveh. Even the name sounds kind of intimidating, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, imagine this. Nineveh was the heart and soul of the Assyrian Empire. And Assyria, to the Israelites, they were the ultimate frenemy. They were powerful, a little scary, to be honest.
I mean, they had a reputation, right?
Big time. They were known for being ruthless, building their empire through conquest. Not exactly the kind of folks you'd want to invite over for a potluck.
More like the guests who show up, eat all the food, then decide to play a little game of let's conquer the living room. So yeah, Nineveh, not exactly the first place on a prophet's travel itinerary for a relaxing retreat.
You got that right. And to make matters even more complicated, God specifically tells Jonah to go to Nineveh.
Talk about a recipe for disaster. So what happens? Does Jonah say, okay, God, you've convinced me Nineveh it is?
Not exactly.
What does he do?
Well, let's just say Jonah decides to take a little detour.
A detour.
Yeah, more like a full-blown escape attempt. He hops on a ship headed in the opposite direction. Talk about determined.
Or maybe just a tad bit terrified. Who knows? Can you blame him? I mean, we're talking about a man tasked with going head-to-head with a nation known for its, let's call it, firm hand. I think my knees would be knocking too.
Totally understandable. But as you can imagine, trying to outrun divine destiny doesn't usually end well.
And cue the dramatic music. A storm rolls in. But not just your average run-for-cover kind of storm. This one has divine intervention written all over it.
The way it's described, you can practically hear the waves crashing and the wind howling. It's like the author wanted to make it crystal clear that this was not a force of nature you want to mess with. Think ancient world equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane.
This is where I'd be building an ark. So there's Jonah stuck on this boat in the middle of what sounds like the mother of all storms.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the sailors doing?
They're freaking out. They're throwing everything they've got at their own gods, praying for a miracle, anything to calm the storm. But this storm, this was different.
This was personal. It's like the universe was sending a very clear message. This storm, this one stops for one prophet and one prophet only. So how do they figure out who's responsible for this cosmic temper tantrum?
They cast lots.
Like a divine game of who messed with Mother Nature, and guess who wins the grand prize?
Jonah.
Talk about bad luck.
Or maybe, just maybe, a healthy dose of divine justice. Because here's the thing, deep down, Jonah knew he was the reason for the storm. He knew he brought this on himself.
Oh man, talk about a wave of guilt. So there he is, caught red-handed, or I guess you could say wet-handed, in the middle of this epic storm. What does he do?
He makes a decision, a desperate decision.
Mm-hmm.
He tells the sailors to throw him overboard. Can you imagine that? Taking a literal leap of faith like that?
Talk about a surrender to this situation.
Yeah.
But the pastor didn't just leave it there, right? He connected this whole dramatic story back to our lives.
He did, yeah. He said it's not just about Jonah and his little adventure. It's about those storms we all face in our own lives.
Right, and not literal storms, obviously. So what did he say our storms really are then?
Well, he started with something kind of relatable, actually. He talked about learning a new sport. You know that feeling when you're just starting out and you're, like, completely terrible?
Oh, tell me about it. I tried golf once.
Okay, so, yeah, remember that feeling like you just want to chuck the clubs into the water hazard and give up. That frustration, that urge to quit, the pastor said that's a storm.
Okay, so it's not really about, like, the actual event like missing the ball. It's more our reaction to it.
Exactly. It's about how we handle those moments where we feel like we're failing, like we want to give up.
Okay, that makes sense. So is it like that for everything? Like even relationships?
He went there too. He said even in those rock-solid relationships, you're going to have those moments of conflict.
Oh, absolutely. Those times you feel completely misunderstood. Those are our relationship storms.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. The pastor said that usually our first instinct is to blame something else when things go wrong. Like it's the traffic or the weather or, I don't know, Mercury in retrograde. But what if, he said, what if we took a look at ourselves instead?
Well, hold on. So you're saying instead of blaming the world, we should be blaming ourselves?
Well, not blaming exactly, but looking at our own role in the situation. He said a lot of times that storm is coming from inside, not outside.
Okay, that's a pretty big shift in thinking.
Yeah, and he even quoted Confucius to drive the point home. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that a wise person looks inward for the source of their troubles, while a fool blames others. Powerful, right?
Seriously, it's so easy to point fingers.
Right, but that's exactly what keeps us stuck in those metaphorical storms. It's only when we can be honest with ourselves about our part in creating that chaos that we can start to find a way out.
So it's not so much about avoiding the tough stuff. It's more about facing it differently. Like realizing that maybe, just maybe, we don't have all the answers.
And that sometimes the best thing we can do is surrender. Which brings us to the next part of Jonah's story, the part where he takes a deep breath and embraces the deep end, literally.
Okay, the suspense is killing me here. Jonah and the giant fish, round 2. Let's hear it. Okay, last we left our fearless prophet, he was taking an unexpected dip in the ocean, swallowed whole by a, shall we say, supersized fish. Talk about a story for the grandkids.
Right. And that moment, that plunge into the deep, the pastor said that's a powerful image of surrender.
So he's not saying we should all go looking for the nearest whale to swallow us whole.
Not quite, but I see where you're going with this. He's drawing a parallel, right? Jonah's literal plunge, it's like a metaphor for the kind of surrender we often resist in our own lives.
Okay, so less about giant fish, more about everyday life. What does that kind of surrender look like if I'm, say, totally overwhelmed at work? Do I just throw my hands up and say, all right, universe, take the wheel?
Well, it's not quite that simple. But I like the enthusiasm. Remember how we were talking about self-reflection? It all comes back to that. See, surrender, in this case, it's not about checking out or giving up. It's about being honest with ourselves, about our limits, about that need to control everything, and being open to guidance from, something bigger than ourselves.
And that guidance, the pastor said, it can come in a lot of different ways, right? Like he really encouraged people to take a hard look at their actions, make things right if they needed to, and really think about if they were living in line with their values and their purpose.
And here's the thing. The pastor said that a lot of times it's in those moments when we get real with ourselves, when we let go of needing to be right all the time, that's when we stumble upon those unexpected rewards.
Rewards? Like what?
Like clarity, a sense of peace, even a renewed sense of purpose. Who knows?
So it's like by letting go, we actually gain something.
Exactly. And the pastor, he summed up this whole idea with a statement that, well, it might seem kind of contradictory at first. He said, people love freedom, but I love submission. Because submission is happier than freedom.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot to unpack. I mean, who doesn't want more freedom?
Right. It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
When you really think about it, there's a deep truth hidden in there. The pastor wasn't saying we should just blindly obey or give up our freedom of choice. He was talking about the peace, the joy even, that can come from aligning ourselves with something bigger than ourselves.
So instead of always striving for control, for freedom from any kind of constraint, which, let's be honest, can be exhausting, we find true freedom in surrender. Whether that's surrendering to a higher power, a set of values, a cause we really believe in.
It's about finding that place where our own desires line up with a purpose that's bigger than us.
That's beautiful.
And that's how he left his listeners, and now you, with a question to think about. What are you holding on to so tightly that it might be blocking you from something greater? Is there a storm raging in your life that might just calm if you could let go?
What a powerful message. It's a good reminder that sometimes the most courageous thing we can do, and honestly the most rewarding thing, is to surrender. To let go of that need to be in control and embrace the unknown.
Because who knows what amazing things we might find when we stop fighting the current and let ourselves be swept along by something bigger than ourselves.
So as you navigate the, shall we say, metaphorical seas of your own life, remember Jonah, remember the storm, and remember that sometimes surrender, it's not a sign of weakness. It's the ultimate act of trust, and maybe even the key to finding true freedom. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
Until next time.